The 2020 gem info for patch 3.26 has arrived, and in this post we also got the reveal of the remaining Trarthus gems that hadn't been teased previously. On top of that, we now know the quality stats for a few of the gems where that information was missing, and there was a bonus Trarthus gem that wasn't listed in the item filter information, Dark Pact of Trarthus, which looks pretty good. So in this video I'm going to cover each of the newly revealed Trarthus gems, and I already went over the 5 that have been previously teased in yesterday's video, so I'll link that one below if you're interested. Chainhook of Trarthus throws out chains which attach to targets, and the skill grants rage generation when hitting chained targets. The base attack speed and damage is the same as the normal Chainhook, which is quite good considering that this attack hits up to 9 targets in front of you. But this skill has a built-in component similar to the normal Chainhook to deal area damage. When the attached chains are broken, area damage will be dealt around the attached target, and you'll be able to break the chains by moving out of the maximum range of 6 meters. So there's going to be an interesting playstyle, particularly for mapping here, where you chainhook to attach several targets in a pack before moving past them to cause an overlapping area of many hits to clear the monster pack. And as far as I can tell, this skill will be really good for killing tanky targets that are surrounded by adds, such as essence rares or map bosses with adds, because you should be able to attach several targets and break all of the chains at the same time in an overlapping area to deal massive damage. Alright, let's take a look at the Trarthan version of Spectral Helix, which is a trap skill and it looks quite powerful. This one appears to have identical attack mechanics to the normal Helix, spiraling through the same number of rotations and bouncing up to the same number of times, and it has the same quality stat for 10% more damage on projectiles that have pierced already. So for the scaling mechanic on this trap version of Spectral Helix, you'll want trap throw speed instead of attack speed. Spectral Helix can hit the same target several times with the same projectile, with good positioning usually resulting in an average of between 2 and 3 hits per use. But that's where the trap version of Helix differs quite dramatically, because using normal Helix you can position to get the most out of each projectile thrown, but traps aren't as easy to position well, especially when throwing multiple traps at the same time. So that's the trade-off here. You can throw multiple traps at the same time, which means you can have several projectiles created per throw compared to the one of normal Helix. But those projectiles are less likely to be as efficient in terms of how many times they actually hit the target. However, notably the traps throw an extra trap while dual wielding, and there's a large amount of reduced trap throwing speed while wielding two-handed weapons. So dual wielding is a big winner here, but you need to make sure you have 2 good weapons, as each trap will randomly choose between the main hand or offhand to deal its damage. Also worth mentioning, being a trap, you can also pre-stack many traps for bosses, which is going to be a lot of burst damage. Now speaking of traps, there's another new trap, Spectral Throw of Trarthus. Unlike Helix, the Spectral Throw trap has slightly less damage effectiveness compared to the normal gem, but it also has different mechanics. Spectral Throw of Trarthus will fire 5 projectiles by default instead of the 1, but these projectiles are fired outwards in 5 different directions from the triggered trap. The wording for how projectiles move is the same, so they will fly out and then return like normal Spectral Throw, but you won't be able to utilise your own movement to manipulate the projectiles to cover distance, as they'll return to the initial trap location where they came from. This one doesn't punish two-handed weapons like Spectral Helix of Trarthus does, and it also doesn't have the upside of throwing an extra trap for dual wielding, so this trap is going to be quite strong with two-handed weapons, but it seems like this skill will be a lot better for clearing and potentially worse than the Helix trap for single target, unless you have very large targets that get shotgunned by several projectiles at once. Next up is Blast Rain of Trarthus. This skill fires a single arrow and modifiers to the number of projectiles do not apply to it. The arrow will fall down and impact a small area of effect before pulsing a burning debuff onto enemies in a larger radius. Something important to know about this skill is that the burning debuff is not an ignite and it's not burning ground, so both ignite and burning ground effects will stack with this. And I'm sure that someone will find a way to stack a bunch of fire dot to deal a bunch of damage with this skill. However, the scaling of this skill is a bit strange, because the burning debuff scales with gem levels, while Ignite will typically scale from your bow's weapon damage, and for this skill in particular, the hit portion is very lackluster for Ignite. With that said, I think this skill with some scaling into area of effect and gem levels will make for a very nice mapping character, as it already has a giant base radius on the burning debuff. Okay, now we have Bladefall of Trarthus. This one is crazy. I believe we haven't had a skill with these kinds of mechanics in the game before. So this skill can be activated and it doesn't have a cast time, it's more like a toggle ability. And once it's activated and turned on, it will constantly cause volleys of blades to fall on nearby enemies. Notably, unlike the normal Bladefall skill, only one blade per volley can hit an enemy. And this new version of the skill only drops a single volley per interval, with 5 lingering blades, compared to the normal skill which drops 5 volleys, each leaving a single lingering blade. Now, as I mentioned, this is a toggle ability, and as such, it costs a base 5% of maximum mana per second to keep it active, and this cost will scale with any support gems you have linked to it. In terms of damage, with this skill having considerably less base damage than the original skill, and the fact that each volley can only hit once, it's unlikely to be very useful on its own, but when combined with Blade Blast to detonate the lingering blades, you have a Bladefall Blade Blast build of old, except it's now a 1-button build instead of 2. But Bladefall of Trarthus has a bit more going on than just that. At a baseline, it will drop a volley of blades every 0.7 seconds, and this interval can be sped up by stacking maximum mana. You gain 2% volley frequency per 100 maximum mana, so there's an interesting trade-off here where you can scale mana to drop volleys faster, but by doing so, the base cost of the skill is also going up as it's percentage based. And this pairs quite well with the new Hierophant that now has some base mana regeneration, and you can consider something like an automated Bladefall to set up lingering blades, combined with Blade Blast linked to Archmage. Just keep in mind that you'll probably need both Spell Cascade and Concentrated Effect to make Bladefall feel good, which will push the cost up to around 9% of maximum mana per second, so you will need a good investment into mana recovery to make it work. Now there's also the Trarthus version of Sunder, which is very similar to the original gem, but it has about 25% less damage effectiveness, and it also has 4 damaging areas instead of 5, so it has a bit less coverage for each main portion of the skill. However, the Trarthan version of Sunder has a somewhat similar mechanic to Volcanic Fissure of Snaking, where it will attempt to begin again after reaching its target if there's another enemy in range. It says that when the wave reaches a target or terrain, it can restart aiming towards an enemy if one is in range, and it can restart up to 2 times. In terms of mapping, this sounds absolutely incredible. Normal Sunder is already really good, and this is just better for clearing if it keeps chaining to new packs of monsters. But there's a few questions that need to be answered to determine if this skill will be good specifically for single target. Right now you can utilise Hydrosphere to double hit a single target with Sunder, once with the main hit of the ability and once with the shockwave that comes off of the Hydrosphere. But what if Sunder of Trarthus can have a chaining-like behaviour between the boss and the Hydrosphere? So it hits the boss the first time, then it starts again and hits the Hydrosphere, and again back to the boss. That's going to potentially be a lot of damage, and that's something to look out for here. Lastly for the new gems is Dark Pact, and this one takes the life sacrifice mechanic to the extreme. Unlike the normal gem, it has no interaction with sacrificing the life of your summoned skeletons, and instead always sacrifices your own life. But instead of sacrificing life for a payoff on each cast like the normal Dark Pact, the Trarthan version will increase a counter each time you cast the skill, up to 7, and on the 7th cast you'll lose all stacks and sacrifice half of your maximum life to deal a massive hit of damage equal to 400% of the life that you sacrificed. So if you sacrifice the maximum amount, you'll deal a hit equal to 200% of your maximum life. That's ridiculous considering how much life you can achieve at the high end. We're talking 20 to 30,000 life or more with crazy levels of investment. Compared to the normal Dark Pact gem, the damage is less consistent, but across all casts combined it deals more damage, and the quality stat allows you to potentially skip some casts to reach the sacrifice and pay off sooner, improving the damage projection against normal Dark Pact even further. Now the shenanigans with Dissolution of the Flesh need to be mentioned here. where you can sacrifice your actual life without actually losing any HP. And if you want more information on how Dissolution of the Flesh works, I have plenty of videos on my channel where I've covered that topic in the past. And keep in mind that this skill does have a 50% less damage with Ailment's modifier, but even with that, a hit this large would inflict a crazy ignite, so that's a potential angle for this skill. Now, before closing out this video, I want to mention a few other tidbits of information we got in regards to the gems that I talked about in yesterday's video. For the Heavy Strike gem, we now know the quality stat. It's further percentage towards the spell damage to attacks modifier, which makes increased spell damage even more powerful to scale damage with this skill. Meanwhile, the Wave of Conviction of Trarthus now has the Nova tag, so you can use Astral Projector with it. That's really nice. And we found out the quality for this one too. It's the same as the normal Wave of Conviction quality, 15% Elemental Pen at 20% quality, which is quite good. And speaking of the normal Wave of Conviction, I did some testing with duration and AoE scaling, and both scale the area of the wave in different ways. Duration makes the wave last longer so it reaches a further distance, while AoE increases the radius, making the wave move faster. And together they'll essentially provide multiplicative scaling to the area. I think this is important info to mention, as I expect this is exactly how Wave of Conviction of Trarthus will scale with these modifiers, and I'm looking forward to finding this gem in-game and getting to play around with it. Lastly, I want to quickly mention here that we have no idea how common or rare these gems will be, so I don't advise planning a starter build around one of them, or at the very least, if you are doing that, make sure you have something to play in the meantime if they end up being hard to come by. That's it for this video, thanks for watching, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.